Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I want to give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to optimize your investing plan, pay off student loans, or simply build a solid financial plan, YFP Planning will help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Andrew in Iowa, who asks, I'm a pharmacist at a state institution and just found out I have access to a 457B plan. I didn't know these existed and haven't heard you guys talk about them on the podcast yet. I have a 401k and 403b through my employer that I contribute to the max, but if I add on the 457b plan, can I contribute an additional $20,500 for 2022, or can I only contribute $20,500 for all three accounts combined? Tim Baker, what are your thoughts? Great question. Haven't talked about 457s at length before.
Yeah, they typically come a little bit later in the financial planning process. I think with a lot of our clients, it's really focusing on, the debt and, the cash flow and a lot of those things. But then in the investment world, it's kind of, getting the 401k, 403b in place, the IRAs. This is kind of really the next wrinkle. And we typically see this more with Gen X, those types of clients. But it's a great question because it can be a very valuable thing to have. So what a 457 is, or 457B, they're actually different types of 457s. Andrew, your question's about the 457B. It's a non-qualified tax advantage deferred compensation retirement plan, which is just a lot of words to say it's another bucket, kind of like a 401k or a 403B. And these are typically provided by employers that are, state, local governments, and some nonprofits. So state and local governments, and then typically directed for high earners at nonprofits. So the way that they work, they're very similar to a 401k, where you can put pre-tax money in, and then once that money goes into that bucket, it grows tax-free. So I always like to kind of break this down because sometimes this is confusing. Is like, okay, if you buy 100 shares of a mutual fund at $200 a share, and it's in that bucket, if you sell it at $400 a share later on, that growth of $200 is not taxed, which is one of the beautiful things. If you do that out in your Robinhood account, where you buy something at 200 and you sell it for 400, you have to pay capital gains tax on that difference per share, which could either be taxed at capital gains rates or ordinary income, which can be prohibitive. So this is just a bucket that allows your money to grow tax free. You can defer 100% of your salary as long as it doesn't go over the limits. And like I said, there are typically two: the 457B, which is typically for state and local, and then the 457F, which is typically for highly compensated people in a nonprofit. Now, one of the other unique things about the 457B is that it has special catch-up deferrals. So a lot of plans, once you reach age 50, you can put more money into that. And that's the same thing with the 457, but it also is even more generous. So in 2020, if you can put, 19,500, which is now going up to 20,500 going into 2022, but 2021, it's 19,500. It's basically double that. So you're north of like 40 grand. So 41,000 going forward. So that's one of the big things is like a lot of people later in their career, when they're when they're sitting down with their financial planner and the financial planner is saying, hey, you don't have enough. This is a potential bucket that you can, squirrel money away. Now, the really interesting piece. So one of the questions we get, Tim, is like, can I contribute to a 403B and a 457? And the answer is yes. They have separate limits. Same thing, like a lot of people say, can I put money into my 401k and my IRA? They're different buckets that have different limits. And the same is true for the 457B. So you can put up to, now going forward in 2022, 20,500 into your 403B and 20,500 into your 457B. Now, the trifecta that is out there that is rare, but sometimes is seen as that 401A, which is sometimes synonymously, used with the 401k. But the 401A is basically a mandatory deferral that your employer is saying you have to put this money in. If you have the 401a, you can put the max, 20,500, the 403b, 20,500, and the 457b, 20,500. It's rare that a lot of people are looking to do that much per year, but it's definitely a thing. But what this allows you to do is it's just extra buckets to potentially fill. So, one of the sometimes we're hampered, especially like an independent pharmacy where the independent pharmacy doesn't have a 401k. They lack a bucket, so they can get the deduction for a traditional IRA because they don't have a 401k. This is the other end of the spectrum, Tim, where they have all of these buckets and you're just trying to figure out how to best manage it. But you typically want to still go through, the 401k, 403b to get the match, and then the IRA. And then potentially that's where the 457 falls in before you start looking at a taxable account. The caveat to that being, if you're looking at early retirement, so early retirement, we would say is anything, 59 and a half or before, then that's where you typically want a taxable account to kind of cover those early years of retirement. Because a lot of these plans, you're going to take a 10% penalty if you take it out before that, outside of some special circumstances. And I think the last thing, Tim, that I would mention is you definitely want to read the fine print on these 457s. And what I mean is that some of these that are government 457s, so they have certain protections where the investments are held in trust and they're protected. You can roll those over. Some of the non-government 457s, you can lose this money because they're not held in trust. They're actually subject to your employer's creditor. Mm-hmm. So and that's why they're called non-qualified. So if your employer who has a 457 goes bankrupt, then the creditors can actually go after that money and you can lose it. So, and sometimes if you leave, so you also want to know like what the withdrawal rules are. Sometimes you have to take that as a lump sum, which is then taxed. So that could put you in a bad spot too. So, but overall, this is a kind of phase 3 type of thing with a lot of clients where you're filling all the buckets and you're like, okay, what's next? And for a lot of people, it's to go to like taxable account or maybe real estate. Mm-hmm. For some people that have availability on this, the 457, this is another way to put more money into a traditional investment and allow that for that tax-free, tax-deferred growth, I should say, because when the money comes out in retirement, that's when it's going to be taxed.
Great stuff, Tim. And as we throw around some of the investing lingo, IRA, 457s, 401k, 403b, for those that are looking for a crash course in some of that terminology or refresher as well, I'd point you to episodes 72 through 76. We did a series that really goes through the X's and O's of an investing 101, as well as we've got 2 blog articles on some of the crash course of retirement planning through employer-sponsored retirement plans. So we'll link to both of those in the show notes, and lots to learn there as well. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. If we feature your question on the show, we'll send you a super comfy YFP t-shirt. You can submit your question by sending an email to info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, or you can record your question by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask YFP. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your name on the show, you can send or record your question anonymously. As we conclude this week's Ask a YFP CFP episode, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this show. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of Your Financial Pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the podcast and have a great rest of your week.